Late season football means injuries are a factor. How did it affect area games? Find out right here on the Varsity 360 Gridiron Report, and it starts right now. Hi there everyone, Mark Coleman here from the Virginia Varsity Sports Network, and this is the Varsity 360 Gridiron Report. Very happy you found us here at Fredericksburg.com. Happy as always to be partnered with the wonderful folks from the Freelance Star. They have a really special group within their sports department covering area high school sports. They call it FLS Varsity. Each week I have the distinct pleasure of chatting sports with one of them or more sometimes. This week I do have one, but he's an awfully good one. He is the assistant sports editor for the Freelance Star, and I like to think that he's a good friend of mine as well. It is Mr. Justin Rice. Good to see you, man. It's been a couple weeks.
It's been a couple weeks. I've been working hard, field hockeying it up, and yeah.
So area high school sports are in playoff swing. We know that those are going hot and heavy right now. Lots of action on the college side as well. Some big news there.
Let's talk field hockey for just one second.
Field hockey, sure.
Just 1 second.
Absolutely.
James Monroe, I was actually tonight.
Okay.
We're taping this. I saw JM win their region semifinal. They're going back to the state tournament.
Excellent.
I think they got a good chance to be real competitive there.
Wonderful.
And then you look at 5A, Mountain View and Stafford. You know, by the time this airs, we'll know. But Mountain View, Stafford, you really like maybe to get back to the 5A state field hockey tournament where they could play each other in the state final. It would be exciting. Field hockey heating up. It's a real good time. Riverbend still alive
with a big,
right now. Yeah.
Was that their first ever playoff win?
Not their first ever regional win. They won one back, but certainly their biggest, certainly their first conference title, their first district title. It's been a year of first for the Bears, and they've really shown well coming out of Conference 4.
Exciting. It's always a busy time.
Always a busy time.
You know.
Oh, and football. There's football going on.
And there's football going on as well. So yeah. Well, why don't we jump right into that? Let's take a look at the number of good games around the area for Week 10. Perhaps the headline of them all was the annual matchup of Cortland and JM. Justin, I think the Cougars made a statement coming off of that loss at King George.
Well, I think if you're looking at it from James and Rose's viewpoint, they caught Cortland on a bad week. You know, there was no chance that Cortland wasn't going to be focused for this game and ready. And the Cougars certainly played like it. They bounced back well. You know, they got the usual good running effort. George Cheetham had 17 carries for 186 yards. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. Also had 3 sacks on the defense. That's a good night for George.
Not a bad night's work.
Yeah, absolutely. And Victor Greene, another one of those running backs, 16 carries for 161 yards. And he scores 3 touchdowns. And then, of course, Blair Lawson gets involved, 11 carries for 114 yards. You know, I expected probably a closer game. You know, I think people could have seen Cortland's running success coming against JM. JM had a hard time against Spotsylvania the week before.
That's a good point.
Spotsylvania running the exact same offense. And, you know, I think the Jackets will freely tell you that those types of running teams, those single wing and wing T teams, those teams have historically given JM problems. And Cortland was, of course, not going to be focused this week. You know, it's a good win for the Cougars.
Not going to be focused.
not going to be focused.
Yes.
It's a good win for the Cougars. They needed to bounce back, certainly, after the loss to King George.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Coach Survey acknowledged it after the game that Cortland just outplayed his team and deserved the win.
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, but it's one of those losses for JM where, okay, you crumble it up, you throw it away,
no foul. Sure.
and you move on.
Yeah.
But that was a good team. They played, you know, I think that's the best team they've played in the regular season.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. So Cortland moves to 7-2 on the year. JM actually falls to 7-2, both squarely into the playoffs. Do you want to chat any playoff situation
we'll get there? We'll get there.
We'll get there. Okay, fair enough. Cortland 48, JM 6. 5A North matchup of area teams that have pretty good seasons going so far. Talk about good seasons. Massaponax brings their undefeated record on the line. They take it up the road to take on a very talented North Stafford team. Ponax with the big 53-14 win. Well, these Panthers are something.
I keep waiting for one of these. You know, we've had these. I know the paper. We've built these things as big showdown games for Massaponax. I keep waiting for them to be a big showdown game where they're tested and they have to win at the end and so on. I mean, they're steamrolling even the rest of the Conference 15 teams who we think are pretty good teams.
Yeah, no doubt.
But you know, they do it in Massaponax fashion. You know, Corey Williams scores a touchdown. Trey Carson scores a touchdown. Joey Benden scores a touchdown. Tristan Medina scores a touchdown. And of course, Trey Watkins with the big game, 9 carries for 181 yards. Yep, 2 touchdowns. You know, they spread it around. They attack you with lots of guys. And again, it wasn't even close. And I think North Stafford's a good team.
I think North Stafford's a good team as well, but I am certain that Massaponax is a good team, and they have a number of players, a number of threats. And they just continue to roll up points and roll up victories. It's a new week, same story. It seems like
we've repeated this one for Massaponax, I think maybe 30 straight times or 32 straight times or something.
Admittedly, I've lost track. Here's another repeat story. Hey, tell me if you've heard this one before. North Stafford's Nakeem Morton scored on a kickoff return for a touchdown, 99 yards.
99 yards. You know, we haven't picked the all-area football teams, but I have a feeling the all-area kick returner that may be sewn up.
Don't give it away. Don't give it away. Yeah. So is this 7 or 8 return touchdowns on the year for him?
Yeah, it's a bunch. And
somewhere in that.
Nakeem is certainly one of the best athletes in the area.
No doubt.
So he gives North Stafford a weapon, though. They're going to have a chance to bounce back. You know, they're still going to be probably at home in the first round of the playoffs. They're a good team.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of people losing to Massaponax. Maybe they get another crack down the line. We'll see.
Yeah. So North Stafford falls to 6-3 on the year. Massaponax 9-0 on the season. Ponax with the 53-14 win over North Stafford. Late season games always have the good rivalries. We have a 4A East matchup between Chancellor and King George. The Foxes coming off a big victory last week over Cortland. They get into a little bit of a track meet here. The Chancellor Chargers with a 42-35 victory over the Foxes. This one was just a back and forth matchup, but more importantly, a big loss on the Chancellor side.
Yeah, certainly. Quarterback Jason Brown, you know, we've had this week. Jason broke his ankle during the game, and his season is over.
Yeah.
Chancellor, it's a great story. Their backup quarterback, JV kid, not even dressed for the game. They had to scramble and get him into the game to play for Jason. And he does a really good job, especially doing one thing: hand the ball to Mario Wisdom. It was a wise decision.
Was it? Okay, I see what you did there. Hunter Kozlow is the kid's name, so I did see much of the film. He ran a little bit of a read option. He had a couple of nice runs himself, made a couple of reads and 2 touchdown passes in this game, I believe. So Kozlow completed 8 of 11 passes, only 62 yards, 2 of them go for scores. But I do think that his best decision was to hand it off to Wisdom. Mario Wisdom, 38 carries, 277 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. 277 yards rushing, 38 carries, 1 game. That's a pretty impressive.
Yeah,
maybe good enough for.
That's a freelance star player.
Yeah, I think so.
Right there,
I think so. Mario Wisdom, the freelance star player of the week. Congratulations to Mario. Wonderful night. But he had to step up.
And it's a good thing for it's a good thing for Chancellor that they're not all Jason Brown. They've got other kids that can do it. Starting probably with Mario Wisdom.
Right.
You know, just a big game in a big spot. You know, Chancellor is going to be in the playoffs without Jason. They're still going to be there. They still want to win games. They still got a shot. They still have a lot of talented athletes on this team.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to put it back. They got a week now against Spotsylvania to try to figure out who they are without their quarterback.
And personally, for Jason Brown, I know he's senior, correct?
Junior.
He is a junior. Okay, good. Yeah, I know that he has been a little bit on the recruiting trail, I believe. So, well, good. Good to know that he still has another year to demonstrate himself.
To come back
That's
and
good.
to be strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Will Clift for King George had a good night at quarterback. This is a wing T team. Look at this. Quarterback Will Clift, 11 of 19, 210 yards passing and a touchdown. That's rather unusual.
I've seen King George several times. I'm almost certain their best passing effort of the season.
Yeah, no doubt. 35 points, but not quite enough. So Chancellor moves to 6-3 on the year. King George at 5-4, both with winning records. I'm going to say, Justin's not going to say it just yet, I don't think. I think they're both in the playoffs.
Chancellor's definitely.
Chancellor's clearly in the playoffs.
King George, I like.
Make your
playoff
plans. Foxes, you're in the playoffs. Chancellor, final score, Chancellor 42, King George 35. Matchup between Mountain View and Stafford. Mountain View a little short-handed in this one, missing a couple of key starters, but the Wildcats able to come away with a 27-0 victory over Stafford. Some new names that we got to see on Mountain View.
Yeah, Ahmad Tweedy, the quarterback, is out. Jamil Collison-Coffey is out. Those are both top 5 passers and rushers in the area this year. Didn't matter. Mountain View goes and finds its backups and leans on those guys, and they roll anyway, 27-0. Demetrius Bell fills in for Collison Coffey at the running back, and he has 16 carries for 110 yards with a touchdown. And then I'm not going to be able to pronounce Janzib Shabazz,
I believe
the quarterback for Mountain View, who fills in for Tweedy and has a good solid game, 6 of 9, 79 yards, throws a touchdown passing, and then they get some other guys as well. Tre Coghill catches the receiving touchdown.
Yep.
He had 2 catches for 46 yards, and Brandon White had 8 rushes for 54 yards and scored a pair of touchdowns. So I think Mountain View did just enough. They snap a 2-game skid, and come back and get a big win. That's sort of what they needed to steady themselves. And now they get a big one here on this Friday, North Stafford. Big
one between Mountain View and North Stafford, certainly. As Mountain View moves to 7-2, they do snap that 2-game skid after a 6-game winning streak. So nice to see them stem the or stop the bleeding there, as it were. Stafford 1-8 on the season, following a 27-0 victory for Mountain View. Important 6A matchup between Hilton and Riverbend. First ever matchup between these two teams. Hilton comes away with the very close 31-28 victory over the Bears.
You've seen Riverbend as much as anybody. Has anybody lost more close games this year than the Bears?
It is absolutely phenomenal. So Riverbend falls to 4-6 on the season. 5 of those losses have been by 3 points or less. In fact, those 5 losses, a combined total of 11 points.
Yeah, and I was told that this was one of the first games where Riverbend felt like maybe they weren't out-physicaled, but they had a team that was their physical match, not necessarily athletes, but they thought Hilton was a very physical team. Riverbend is a very physical team, and it went the Bulldogs' way.
It did go the Bulldogs' way. It was a back-and-forth affair, so Riverbend jumped out to a 14-0 lead. Hilton was able to close the gap. They went to halftime at 14-all. Riverbend comes out in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, takes a 28-14 lead. Hilton comes back and ties it, and then it's a late field goal by Hilton that ends up being the difference there. But yeah, so Hilton, it was back and forth. Bend had the upper hand, at least on the scoreboard, for much of the game. But I tell you, Hilton, first time I've seen these kids, they've got a quarterback, Donovan Williams. He's a commit to Connecticut. He is legit. I know that I'm not breaking any news there, but he absolutely is a threat. 19 for 28 passing the ball, 289 yards and 3 touchdowns passing. He also had a number of runs. This Riverbend defense, especially on a run side, is quite effective. Jared Austin, who is, I believe, their 3rd string running back. I'd hate to see what the first and second look like. Austin, 18 carries, 122 yards and a touchdown rushing. That might be the first 100-yard rusher that Riverbend has given up this season.
Yeah, and I think Riverbend certainly had offensive numbers here today. Jordan DeMarco had a nice game, 19 of 29 for 260 yards with a touchdown. That's one of his best days of the year. Matt Young, the receiver, with 7 catches for 103 yards, certainly with an impact. And then they get 2 touchdowns rushing out of Orlando Jones and another touchdown out of Lorenzo Dorr, 12 carries for 69 yards for Dorr. The Bears are certainly Hilton's match. They're gonna have to find ways now. They get this week to rest. Then it's playoff time, and they're gonna have to find a way to win some of these games.
And we feel fairly certain that they're in the playoffs.
I feel pretty good about it, that Riverbend's going to be in at no worse than 8th. I think probably 8th in the 18 bracket.
So for back-to-back years making the playoffs for Riverbend, that's a first for them. A relatively young school, their 11th year playing football. I'll tell you though, Justin, we previewed a number of teams in the area before this season started, and I suggested this could be a better team than it was last year with a worse record, and I think it's played out that way. 4-6. But this is a strong team. I think that this year's Riverbend team beats last year's Riverbend team.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. You're going to argue with me on that, right?
Maybe.
But a good team, but they have not been able to get over the hump and win these close games.
Well, they've certainly played a tough schedule.
They have.
They've certainly played a tough schedule.
So they have actually finished their season. They'll be on bye next week, Riverbend, with the 31-28 loss at the hands of Hilton. Let's take a quick tour around the area for other games played in Week 10, and we'll start with Eastern View. Is this their 2nd consecutive shutout? I believe it might be.
I think the Cyclones are getting well at the right time here. They get a nice game from Josh Stalling, 17 carries for 122 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think what a great story he's turned out to be.
Yeah.
The answer to what was Easterview going to do in the ground without Kendrick QB. Oh, they were just going to have
that player's name?
They were going to have the quarterback be the running back. Great idea for Easterview. That's a big win for them. I'll tell you, speaking of big wins, Colonial Beach 26-0 over Lancaster. Lamar Lucas, finally, Lamar had such a great offseason, and, Colonial Beach has played this really tough schedule. I know Lamar has been looking for that breakout game. 16 for 125, 2 touchdowns, when the Beach needed it most. The Drifters are back in the playoff hunt.
Oh, wow.
The Drifters are there.
Good for him.
Potomac.
My goodness, I was watching this game on Twitter, if you can watch on Twitter. I was following it on Twitter. This was a close game.
Yeah, real close, and I'm a little surprised. I haven't seen Potomac, and I think Brook Point is clearly better. Brook looking ahead to Massaponax?
Maybe. They dodged a bullet if that was the case. They come away with a win. 14-12.
14-12, and you get the win. And finally, Spotsylvania, 56-6
you were
over
at this
Carolina.
game.
I was at this game.
Yeah.
Just a really total effort by the Knights. They played 3 really, really good quarters against James Monroe last week. They played 4 really good quarters against Caroline. They got 107 yards from Michael Janello and 106 yards from Michael Shelton. And their wing team, they're just running a really efficient Spotsylvania playoff team.
Like the Knights, yeah.
I like the Knights in the playoffs. I think that happens, yeah. Louisa, 28-14 over Orange. The Lions with a nice bounce back there. Again, yet another playoff team. I think Louisa again, Joe Whalen, 21 carries for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think the Lions have lots of things to get excited about. And then Saturday I saw Essex and Washington Lee. Essex with a 22-0 win over Washington Lee. That's a great job by WNL. I've seen Essex the last couple of years. This is the best Essex team I've seen in a couple of years. WNL did a great job. They were going without their starting quarterback. Did a great job keeping themselves in the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, we're winging it here. How many miles a week do you drive to be able to go to all these high school sporting events?
Ask me in the next few weeks at field hockey, volleyball, high school football playoff, overlapping things, and the number of drives I'll make for those games.
Okay. I'll remember to do that. But some good games this past week.
Good games. Lots of good games. Lots of teams. I think we know who people are at this point, right? We know you.
We know you.
Yeah,
we know
certainly.
You. And we know if you're a playoff or not playoff teams, but you're going to have to stay tuned to find out what we think about that. Yeah. Previewing Week 11 in Fredericksburg area high school football, that means we have reached the end of the regular season. 1 game left for these teams to be able to make their playoff push. Let's take a look at the playoff picture, and we'll start with the 1A East and the 2A East. We've got a couple of teams from the area that are going to be playing each other in this.
Yeah, Colonial Beach and Washington Lee, and like a big rivalry game. They both want to win this thing, and it matters huge for both of them. Colonial Beach has rallied their way back into the playoff picture. Their strength of schedule is borne out. They're the 12 seed out of 12. I don't think they improve to better than 12. Maybe with a win, maybe they move out of 12. But I think with the loss, they're still going to be in. You're still looking at a game against Franklin or Rappahannock in the first round, an opponent you're familiar with. I think the Drifters are happy after the way their season has gone. They're happy to roll their dice with that.
Okay, there you go with the gambling. So you have told me several years now. I don't know how. Is this our 4th year doing this? I've lost track. It feels like 20.
It seems like infinite.
Yes. A chip and a chair. That's all you can hope for. Exactly all that you can ask for if you, particularly if you're on the lower half of that playoff schedule. Colonial Beach 3-6 on the season, and they've got their playoff hopes alive. They may get to play a Week 11.
They got a chance.
Or an 11th game.
I think they've got a good shot to do that. Washington Lee, they're playing to stay at home in the first round. They're still in the bottom half of the top half of the 2A East. They need a win to make sure they're going to play at least 1 game at home, where you're going to play, someone like George Mason or Greensville or Central of Woodstock, something like that. Okay. But you got a chance to play at home.
Awesome. So big time in 1 and 2. How about we move up to Conference 3 or Division 3?
Region. The 3A East, of course.
3A East.
James Monroe. Here we go. I've got a just ironclad lock for you. James Monroe will be the 2 seed in their pod in the 3A East. Hopewell's going to be number 1. Yep. James Monroe is going to be number 2. The rest of the 3A East is a complete mess with a bunch of big games here at the last week. The Culpeper-Brentsville game is a massively, hugely important game for this last week of the season. I think the winner of that game is probably the 3 seed in the 3A East. I think James Monroe probably plays the winner of that game in the second round of the playoffs, assuming JM does what they need to do. And then Spotsy's got an edge to be the 8 seed, but all those teams, Armstrong, Petersburg, Spotsylvania, John Marshall, all those teams are right in the mix. They're all teams that have been winning challenged this year. Whoever can manage to find a win in this last week, they all have got tough matchups. Whoever can find a win out of those it's got a chance to be 4 or 5 to really set themselves apart. Okay. And the other ones are going to be counting on rider points and so on. I like Spotsy in as the 8th seed and go to Hopewell. Maybe 7th seed, maybe they play JM again. Maybe. Okay. Maybe.
So these two 3A teams that we talked about, Spotsy and JM, both have Region 4A teams that they will be playing this week. I'll get it out here. Eventually, I'll come around and spit it out. JM will be at home playing King George, and Spotsylvania is going to be on the road at Chancellor.
Yeah, and Chancellor and King George, that's two teams certainly with things to play for. Up in the 4A East now, if we want to keep moving our way up. You know, Cortland, Eastern View, Chancellor, Louisa, their spots are guaranteed. They are playoff teams for certain. I think Cortland is definitely the 1 seed in their pod of the 4A East. Eastern View and Chancellor right now tied for 3 and 4. Eastern View with a tiny little edge in possible points. I'm sorry, they're tied for 4th and 5th. Hanover's above them. Yeah, and 3rd. So you're looking at Eastern View and Chancellor, and maybe they're about to play each other again for the 2nd time this year. Whoever outpoints the other maybe this week is possibly hosting that game.
It just struck a question in my mind. We didn't rehearse this, so I'm not sure that you know the answer. But if two teams do end up tied all the way out to the nth percentage, what's the tiebreaker?
Yeah, there's a list of 7 or 8 tiebreakers, you know, that go to things like how many games did your opponents win, things like that. There's you know the average of your opponent's power points, things like that. There's about 7 or 8 of them that I usually have to think about and practice before Friday night of this week. And then let's not forget King George, of course. We talked about King George and Powhatan are the only 2 teams in the 4A in their pot of the 4A East who have not either clinched a playoff spot or been eliminated. One of them is going to the postseason. I'm pretty sure to play at Cortland in the first week of the playoffs.
Okay.
King George with a big advantage. I like the Foxes there. I think King George plays at Cortland next week in the first round of the playoffs. Rematch.
Actually, if you were watching during our review of the previous week's games, I told the Foxes fans to book their tickets. I'm saying King George in the playoffs. Now that you tell me this stuff, I'm not quite so confident, but I'll still stand by
King
it.
George should be pretty confident. Their minimum, I don't want to get into numbers. Their minimum is 22.0. That means everything goes against them this week.
Right.
Powhatan's maximum is 22.4. That means everything goes their way. So virtually for King George not to make the playoffs, everything would have to go against King George, including some crazy upsets that you don't think are possible, and everything would have to go for Powhatan.
And just for our viewers to make sure that they understand what you mean by everything. So that means all of the teams that King George has beaten and lost to would have to lose.
You want those teams to lose,
for it to be the worst, their minimum, and they would have to lose.
Yes.
And Powhatan, all the teams that they have beaten,
especially the teams they've beaten, those teams win.
Win, and they would win. Because you get the way the
Powhatan's really got to maximize, and King George has to minimize for the Foxes not to be the 8th seed in the playoffs. King George goes and gets a win. You know, can they move up? I think it's tough to move up. I think it's tough.
Okay. Speaking of move up, how about we skip a step and move up to the 6A South?
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
So Riverbend has finished their season. Colonial Forge in good shape, though.
Colonial Forge definitely the 1 seed in the pod, and furthermore, because of how they structured the playoffs, they're going to play the pod. That's the 8-team 2-conference grouping. They're going to play that down to 1 team. Colonial Forge will be at home. If they're alive, they will host those games until there is one of those 8 teams remaining.
That's a change from
from last year, exactly. You know, they want to keep that Ocean Lakes Oscar Smith matchup in the region's hands and not in the region's hands and not a state semifinal game.
Right.
You know, so they want to keep that in the region's hands. So they're going to play that half down to 1 team. 6A South Conference 3 and 4, they're going to play that down to 1 team. And if Colonial Forge is alive, they'll be at home, including in the first round, where I think decent money, you're getting the Riverbend Bears again.
There you go. There you go. That was a good game earlier this season.
Sure.
Might be an interesting matchup there.
Sure.
Rematch.
And Riverbend is like King George, it should be said. They're not a lock. They're not a certainty.
Right.
But you like their minimum against James River of Chesterfield, their maximum. You like where Riverbend's at. They're in the same situation where everything would have to go against the Bears. All the teams, you know, that's Cortland losing, Chancellor losing, Massaponax losing, things like that. If those things go against Riverbend and then everything goes James River's way, then playoffs become questionable. But you really think between some of those games that Riverbend play, Massaponax maybe got a chance to get them to the Rider Point. Cortland's got a chance to get him a Rider Point. Chancellor's got a chance to get him a Rider Point.
Hilton's got a chance.
Hilton's got a chance. Yeah. You think there's enough good teams out there that Riverbend's playing.
Bears fans, book your tickets for the playoffs. Riverbend in the playoffs.
This guy
means nothing. You'll take a look at my track record.
Forge. Maybe you're playing Hilton again. They're going to be the 2 seed. Maybe you play Hilton again.
The chip in the chair.
Chip in the chair. There you go. They're alive.
Now we skipped over the 5A North, and that's because this is maybe the most intriguing situation. Lots of variability, I guess. But let's get the easy one out of the way. I'm going to say Massaponax. They're in good shape.
Well, in good shape.
You thought I was going to say something else.
Doesn't take it too far.
Is in. Yes.
Every local 5A team, with the exception of Stafford, is in the 5A North playoffs. That includes Orange, Mountain View, North Stafford, Brook Point, Massaponax. They're all going to the postseason.
There you go.
And I think most of them, with the exception of Orange, will be at home in the first week of the postseason. I think Mountain View and North Stafford, that's 7-2 Mountain View and 6-3 North Stafford. That's a pretty big matchup. Right now, those two teams are side by side in the playoffs. In terms of getting maybe one up and one down, that's going to sort of decide that. I don't think either of them jump into the top 4 of the conference. But the top 4 of the conference, of the region, is where it's at this week. It's an awesome, if you were drawing up a bracket, you draw it up just like this. Broad Run is going to play Tuscarora. That's 7-2, 4th place Broad Run against 9-0, 2nd place Tuscarora. And of course, Massaponax is 9-0. They're playing Brook Point 8-1. So all the top 4 teams in the 5A North are going to play each other. It's going to be a cool Friday night.
Playoff before a playoff.
Yeah, a little bit of playoff. It's a playoff to set up that top 4. The question is, if Massaponax wins, do they stay ahead of, and Tuscarora wins, who stays at number 1? Massaponax with a slight advantage. Their minimums are tied. Massaponax with a 0.1 edge in their maximums. That's going to be really, really close. Massaponax wants Chancellor, Cortland, want those teams to win. Of course, Riverbend doesn't play, so that hurts them. But then all the other Conference 15 teams are going to, they've beaten them all, so that's moot. The Huskies got a little better advantage, I think, in that they had their schedules a little more diverse.
Right.
Now, the question, my favorite question is, let's say Broad Run beats Tuscarora, and Brook Point beats Massaponax. Can Brook Point jump and be the number 1 seed? I think yes.
Yeah,
I think the answer is yes. I think if you get that scenario where Brook Point beats Ponax and Broad Run wins, I think Brook Point jumps up and becomes the number 1 seed in the conference, and then maybe you're looking at Tuscarora and Massaponax 2-3 in some fashion, and then Broad Run staying at 4th.
So many intriguing scenarios here. Certainly Massaponax, with their long regular season winning streak, it would be interesting to see if they were to lose a regular season game, what that might do to set them up into the playoffs. We know that the playoffs are a big deal for them. That's going to be a big matchup, though. I mean, a blowout, or maybe not a blowout. Wrong choice of words there. A very intriguing game between Brook Point and Massaponax. I think
certainly,
headlines.
We've talked about it.
Very strong.
We've seen all these Conference 15 opponents for Massaponax, and we've waited for one of them to be a good game. Last chance. Here we go.
No doubt. Yeah. No doubt. How about the performance of these Fredericksburg area teams, particularly in the 5A North?
Yeah, I don't know if you did the math. 17 of 19.
17 of 19
public school teams are, I think, pretty well. They're going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, there you go.
17 of 19.
That's an awfully impressive record. Certainly proud of the work that the schools have put in to be able to make the postseason. But there is still 1 week left for almost every team from around the area. Big playoff implications, if not to make the playoffs, at least to set up the seeding for this. Lots of good football to be played. Can you believe we're at the end of the regular season?
We're here.
Where did the season go?
Absolutely.
How about that? It's been fun, but there's still plenty of fun left. Hope that you're able to get out and see one of these wonderful Fredericksburg area high school football games. That's a wrap for this week's installment of the Varsity 360 Gridiron Report as we go barreling toward the final week of the regular season. But the other playoff games from the other high school area sports for fall well underway, and so I certainly appreciate the time of Mr. Justin Rice, Assistant Sports Editor for the Freelance Star. my very favorite assistant sports editor that I know, but a very busy guy. I certainly appreciate the time, man.
Twitter on Friday night. Twitter on Friday night. We'll have playoff pairings for you as best we can. You know, I'm in there furiously typing in results and so on, and we like to try to figure those things out Friday night.
Some people think that this is more important than political poll type responses.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
I agree.
So that would be at FLS Varsity?
At FLS Varsity, we'll have stuff up going on Friday night. Yeah.
Yes.
You might have to stay up late with us, but we'll work Friday night to figure it out.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I hope
man.
you are as well. For the good folks from the Virginia Varsity Sports Network and on behalf of the wonderful folks from the Freelance Star, my name is Mark Coleman. Thanks for watching, everyone.